Begin the current Daf, this Eruvin Daf Peiches, begins 6 lines down at the top of the Yamid, but the Gemara continues the explanation regarding the halacha, the Mishnah, as applies to gezustra, which is the porch over water, and we continue this qualifying this permissibility about drawing water from the porch over the body of water. Appreciate what is joining us for today's daf. Some of the things we can discuss in today's daf are pouring water out of a balcony into the water below. So we had been speaking about drawing water. I'm going to discuss regarding pouring the water out into the water below. Additionally, if a person uses without permission someone else's ruin more frequently than the real owner, he still needs an area, but it's not like considered as if it's his area. The halachas of disposing wastewater in the person's property and as it spills out to the street. And the concept we've mentioned many times, a person cannot make forbidden on his friend through the ear space. So we begin the current daf. 6 lines down at the top of the Yamid. Amar Rabbi Baruch says, we did not learn in the halacha, the Mishnah, that according to the Rabbanan, when you have a mechitza tluya, you have a hanging partition, we permit by the porch, we permit you to go ahead and have the halacha over the body of water. That's elul amalois. That's only, as we were speaking about, drawing the water. But to spill the water in the hole in the porch that it should go out to the sea, that is also, that's actually going to be forbidden. The reason that is because the river is going to take this water that you spilled out of the partitions of the gezustra, out of the porch, and you're going to be transferring from the Rosh Hashanah to the cameras. Which Maskvelo Rav Shizvi asks on this. He says, what's the difference between this case of the gezustra and the uka? What's the uka? We're going to see in the next Mishnah on the Daf that if you have a courtyard that's less than 4 amas squared, you're not allowed to pour water into that courtyard on Shabbos unless you make an uka. What's an uka? Uka is a pit that contains 2 saw of liquid. On that, the Mishnah says that even if the uka was filled up from before Shabbos, that cesspool was already filled up with water, even so that the water is going to go out into Rosh Hashanah, it's going to be okay. So then why is this any different than this case over here? When you're pouring into a permitted area, who cares that the water is going to take it out? Why is it any different than that cesspool? And that says the Gemara, no, the difference is hani timing. By the uka, there the water is meant to dissipate and to be absorbed into the ground. So therefore, when you're pouring the water into the courtyard and there's the uka, there's the cesspool, your intention is that it should get absorbed in its place. Now, if it goes out, that's not your intention. It's not what's called neskayim machshavtim, that it's going to be permitted. And even if you're intending to, as Rashi explains, there really wouldn't be any really prohibition because you're really pouring the Rosh Hashanah. So even this idea that it's going to go outside, okay, that's not really the intention. It usually gets absorbed into the uka, into the cesspool. But by the gezustra of our Mishnah, loy taimi, there a person knows for sure it's going to go out, and it's not going to dissipate. It's not going to finish before it goes outside, and therefore that's the difference. One version holds that yes, only lamalis is permitted, but lishbech is not, and it's different than the case of the cesspool because there it gets absorbed into the ground, and even if it overflows, it's unintentional. Now, ikadami doesn't say an opposite version. That no, Amar don't say lamalis udishor, that the halacha of the Mishnah is only to permit you to draw the water from the sea beneath your window, but lishbech also, but to pour it out is forbidden. No, a lishbech namishor, no, even to pour out the water is going to be permitted because he doesn't care that it goes outside. In contrast, as we're going to see, a courtyard that's less than 4 amas, there it's forbidden to pour it out if you don't have an uka, is because then you want it to go outside, that it shouldn't ruin your courtyard. So that's why you need to have the uka, you need to have the cesspool, because with the cesspool, then you want it to get absorbed in the cesspool. So that's why it doesn't contradict the halacha of the following Mishnah that we're going to see, that when it's less than daled amas, you need an uka, but if you have an uka, it's going to be okay. And that was the question we asked on either one of those 2 aspects of the halacha, regarding halacha, what we're saying regarding lishbech, according to the either version, it's still going to be different than the cesspool. For the first version, when we say to pour out is forbidden, the cesspool is different because you want it to get absorbed in there, and even if it doesn't, it's not your intention for it to go out. According to the second version, it says actually lishbech, to pour out, is going to be permitted. It's not a contradiction on the gezustra either, because on the case of the uka, because if you don't have an uka, and it's less than daled amas, then your intention actually is to go out. Which the Gemara asks on this version that you're saying pouring out is permitted, says, Rav Shizvi says, pshita, hainu uka. What do you mean? That's exactly what we say by the uka, that even though it's filled up, the cesspool is filled up from before Shabbos, we say that you're allowed to pour water into your courtyard, even though it's going to flow outside. So that's exactly what we're saying, that you let it pour the water out over here, even though it's going to flow outside. So if you want to know, this is the inverse of what we said in the first version. What would you say? Hani taime by the uka, it usually gets absorbed. The hani like taime, but here by the gzustra, it doesn't usually get absorbed. Meaning, you know it's going to go outside. Kamashalon doesn't come to tell you, it doesn't make a difference to us. And since your intention is not for it to go outside, even though you know inevitably it's going to go outside, it's going to be permitted. So again, those are two different versions, whether he allows disposing of the water where it will flow beyond the area. Now, we said in the Mishnah, and we discussed this at length on the previous daf, when you have two porches, one above the other one, so we said that they're going to have to go ahead and make an Erev together, because if not, even the lower one makes it forbidden on the upper one, who has these mechitzas, which really should allow him to draw the water. He who didn't make an Erev with him is going to make it forbidden on him. He says, we didn't learn this halacha only if this lower porch is close by to the upper one. It's not at a distance of 4 tvachim from the upper one. But if it's distant, then the upper porch is going to be permitted, like we said, because then the lower one doesn't have any rights in the upper one. The only way he'll have it is through the ear space by throwing it at a distance of 4 tvachim. And that's why it doesn't make it forbidden, like the Gemara says, Rabbi Tameh. Rabbi goes according to his reasoning as we mentioned in the previous daf. The Rav says, a person does not make forbidden on his friend. That it should be considered the utility of his too, that it's a shared utility, that, you didn't join the Erev. He cannot do that if it's derech aver, if it has to be through an ear space. So the halacha of the Mishnah that the two gezuz terais, the low one's going to make it forbidden, the upper one is only if he's very close, but if he's far further away than Dal Tvachim, he's not going to make it forbidden. Now the Gemara introduces the following cryptic statement that's going to relate back to the halacha of the Mishnah we just said. Amar Rabba, Amar Reb Chia. Rabbi Yosef, Amar Reb Oishia says the following two statements. Yesh gezel b'Shabbos, there is theft on Shabbos, v'churva mavzel b'ayim. And the dilapidated building, the ruin, goes back to the owner. So as Rashi explains, the Gemara assumes right now that what he's saying is like this. A person, what does it mean, yesh gezel b'Shabbos? A person is allowed to steal on Shabbos domains and to use his friend's churva, the dilapidated building that his friend owns, right next to his house, just like he uses it during the weekday. Because generally a churva, a ruin, the owners don't use it so much. So the neighbor always uses the churva of his friend. So he acquires it with what's called kinyane gezela, like acquisitions of theft, like other gazlanim, and it becomes his domain. Now, the second half of the statement of churva mavzul b'ayim, that sounds like that against his will, the Isser Shabbos is going to return the churva, which is not really his domain, to the real owners. And that he's going to have to give it back to his neighbor, and it's not acquired to him. So obviously, he's not allowed to use that churva. So the Gemara says, Haguf Akasha. There seems to be an internal contradiction. Amid yesh gezel b'Shabbos, you said there is theft on Shabbos. Al-Makan, I mean, say, you could steal on Shabbos. I mean, it's like it's considered your domain. Obviously, you acquired it. And then you say, that the ruin goes back to the owner. Amaloikani, obviously you're not acquiring. I understand, you're contradicting yourself in the same sentence. And then he says, no, this is what he was saying. Yesh din gezel b'Shabbos. What does it mean? There's the law of gezel on Shabbos. As Rashi explains, there's the law of hashavas gezela applies to domains of Shabbos. Ketzad, how so? Is because the churva mavzer, the ruin, the building, the dilapidated building, returns the theft, l'baylam to the owner, and then you're not allowed to go ahead and use it. So it's like a virtual hasham. It's like Shabbos is automatically returning the ruin, the churva, to its original owner, to the rightful owner, and then you cannot go ahead and use that ruin. It's not considered yours, and it would be a problem of carrying a Shabbos. Now, on that, we relate back to the halacha of the Mishnah we just mentioned before. Amar Rabba says, we asked on our halacha that we just said, this was Rabba's teaching from our Mishnah. We just quoted the Gemara, the halacha in the Mishnah says, if you have two porches, one above the other, we said that the lower one is make it forbidden on the upper one. The upper one made a valid mechitzas. He's allowed to have mechitzas to he's allowed to draw the water. But the guy who's next to him is his next door neighbor who has a window with a porch right beneath him, he makes it forbidden on him. Now, we asked, if you say that there is the law of gezel on Shabbos, which, as we just explained, means to say that automatically these inappropriate rights that the lower gezustra use with the upper one, we say on Shabbos, no, it's not yours. You have no rights. It goes back to the original owner. Samay asuras. So why does the lower porch make it forbidden the upper one? But it's the domain of the upper window from his gezustra. And the lower one, when he uses it during the weekday, he uses it without permission, without ownership. And even so, we see that since he usually uses it during the weekday, we see that he does make it forbidden. That contradicts the concept that we just said that yesh din gezel b'Shabbos and the churva is mavis l'baylim. It goes back to its rightful owner. So Rav Sheshes, he says, No, it's not difficult because what are we talking about over here is where they made the partition of the upper porch b'shutfis with a partnership. The partition was built b'shutfis, and therefore it's not inappropriate. He is an owner in that partition, and therefore he could make it forbidden if they didn't join the Eruv. So then says, wait, if that's the case, then ki asu, then even when the lower courtyard, when the lower porch when they made litachtoina for the lower porch, if they have even if they have a partnership in the upper porch, but nami, it should still be forbidden. Meaning the halacha was said in the Mishnah that only the upper porch made a mechitza tluya. The lower one didn't. Sounds like that if the lower one made its own mechitza tluya, then the upper one would be permitted and the lower one would be permitted because they both have their own mechitza tluya. But why? He still has partnership in the upper one and he didn't join the Eruv. So the fact that they didn't join the Eruv, he should make it forbidden on the upper one. Why is then it going to be permitted? And that says the Gemara, no, keeping the asul b'tachtaina. Since you went and you made one for the lower one, Goli daita. So the lower one is revealing its intention to the upper porch, that it's removing itself from Shabbos from the upper porch, because he's telling him, me by you, I don't prefer that. Because this partition was only made for the heter of Shabbos. You don't need it during the weekday, you can draw very easily without it. So if he's making his own mechitzah tluya, obviously he's saying that I don't want to be part of yours and I want to have my own mechitzah tluya, and therefore he's not going to make it forbidden, even though he has partnership rights in that porch right next to him. So we continue in the halach in the next Mishnah. Also continue on regarding water on Shabbos and regarding mechitzas. Says the Mishnah, Chatzer she b'chusim arba amas. If you have a courtyard that's less than daled amas, it's not such a big courtyard. Sein shefkin b'teicha mayim, what 4 amas is not so big. So ain't shayfin mayim, it's what is it, around 50 square feet. So ain't shayfin mayim b'teicha b'Shabbos. You can't pour water in it on Shabbos. And the Gemara is going to explain what's the reason why. Why can't you pour water in that courtyard? Elam came, and then we referenced this halacha previously on this amud. Elam came asla uka. Only if you make a pit that's mazekes, a sign that could contain 2 saw of the water, which you must explain what's the reason of this measurement that the cesspool has to be able to hold 2 saw of water. Minaneke bulamata, from the hole and beneath, meaning there's a hole of the cesspool, you have to be able to have sasayim in the cavity of it, not just in the whole cesspool, because it has to be able to contain it. And this is beimi b'chutz, beimi b'fnim. Whether you make the cesspool in the courtyard, whether you make it in the Rishus Rabbim right next to the courtyard, it's both okay. Ella, the one difference is shemi b'chutz tzarich likmer. If you make it on the outside of the courtyard in the Rishus Rabbim, then you have to go ahead and cover it with boards, so that when the water falls in, it goes into a makam tur and it goes into a covered area, not into an uncovered area. I mean, but if it's in the courtyard, then it doesn't have to be covered.
So Bachutz is the Rishus Harabim already?
It's in the Rishus Harabim.
So how does it do it? So it goes out from Rishus Yuchid.
Yes, there's a lot of discussion regarding how this works. It's not. It's going to be a makam tur because it's not part of the Rishus Harabim itself. Because it's a cesspool.
So there is that cesspool on its own has its own Rishus?
Right. It's not part of it's not Rishus Harabim per se. It's right next to the courtyard, but it's not in the courtyard itself. But it's outside, out of his courtyard itself. Now, Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, he says, biv, when you have a ditch that's made for the wastewater to go out from the courtyard to the Rishus Harabim, which is well known as a gutter, shukamer arba ames. If it's covered 4 ames Rishus Harabim in the distance of 4 ames in the public domain, which the rabbis knew that a distance of 4 ames is a shiur of absorbing in the 2 saw of water, which is the water a person usually used during a day. And as we'll see this in the Gemara, so then you can pour water into that gutter on Shabbos because the water will be absorbed. And even if it's not going to be absorbed, because let's say the gutter happened to have had water in it from before Shabbos, but since most of the days of the year it's used to absorb it, so even if it's going to go out, that's not your intention. And since that's not your intention, so then it's going to be permitted, because even if you would have that intention, it wouldn't be an Issa Deiraisa, because you're not putting it straight into Rishus Harabim, rather it itself overflows and goes into the Rishus Harabim, so therefore when you additionally don't have that intention, it's going to be permitted even like a chiyuv. The sages are more stringent. They say no. Afila gad ois chatzer meya amma. Even if you have a roof or a courtyard that's 100 amas long, liyishpich al pi aviv, you're not allowed to pour it onto the gutter. Meaning, you can't put it into the ditch itself. So although the length is very long till it's going to go out in the property, 100 amas and it could get absorbed in there, it doesn't make a difference. Since you're putting it into the gutter itself, so then it's going to flow directly from your strength, from your power, to the Rosh Hashanah. And whoever sees is going to say, this guy's pouring outside from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah, and he wants to go ahead and carry outside. As the Gemara says, as a Gzeir Shemayim, maybe people are going to say, oh, look at that guy's pipe, that it's flowing out water on Shabbos. Like obviously there's no problem about carrying from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah. So the Chacham say you can never pour it onto the gutter. What you could do is you could pour the water onto the roof. Mine, you're in Lebiv, and then the water flows from the roof onto the gutter, and then the gutter takes it out to the street. Now, yeah. So that's exactly. It's not your direct kayach.
How do we use toilets? Why would it do that?
Yeah, because we don't. Because Taisus also discusses somewhere over here. We're not so machmer regarding this because you're not really doing anything. You're not really carrying. It's you're not even if you did it behead, you wouldn't be carrying. The chama very machmer because what are you doing? It's going to.
I'm asking the Chacham, why is there lo yishbach?
What?
I'm saying, why did the Chacham say lo yishbach?
Oh, why did they say lo yishbach? Right. Yeah, it's because it's gzeira. It's not really it's etzem isser. Like the Gemara is going to say, it's gzeira shemayim. To people might say. What was the other point?
Our toilets are like this. How do we use toilets?
So that's similar type of a shemuz about regarding the how's it happening, where's it going, and then what's the processes. Yeah, this is also. I mean, it depends. You have to know what the system is, but yeah, exactly. And Taisus actually discussed a case of the toilets that used to have over bodies of water, and he discusses regarding the minig oilim to use those types of toilets.
The other way around with a regular faucet, where the cup Z.
Right.
It's a cup Z.
Right, exactly. It depends where it's coming from and how it's coming, and what's considered your strength and what's grumma. There's a lot of grumma over here, and that factors in very, very strong. So now the Mishnah qualifies the halacha of the reisha. In the reisha, we said that if it's less than the wording of the Mishnah opened up, if the courtyard is less than Daled Amas, then you need the ukkah. But we were saying that if it's Daled Amas, it's no problem. Then you can pour out the water. So this shiur of Daled Amas says the Mishnah hachatzav achsadra, the courtyard with the achsadra is like an open porch in front of the courtyard. That mitzdarf al amas, they combine for the shiur of Daled Amas, so that then you could pour out the water without the cesspool. That's what the Mishnah is coming to qualify me here. Now the Mishnah then concludes with a different halacha related to this ukkah. So too, if you have two porches, upper stories that are zu k'neged zu, there's one opposite the other, and you have a courtyard that's less than Daled Amas in front of them, where they pour out their wastewater. So again, then you have to make an ukkah because it's less than Daled Amas. Now you have two porches overlooking the same courtyard that's less than Daled Amas. So if miktsas, and if some of them, which Rashi translated as that one of the two porches, asa ukkah, they go into the courtyard and they make a cesspool. Umiktsas la asa ukkah, and the other porch people, they don't make a cesspool. So esha asa ukkah mutar, so the ones that made the cesspool can be permitted. Eshle asa ukkah asurin, the ones who didn't make it can be forbidden. We'll see at the end of the Gemara what's the reason why it's going to be forbidden. What's this halacha? But the ones who made the cesspool, they could use it. They could pour out their wastewater. The ones who didn't cannot. So now the Gemara explains my time. The Gemara says, what's the reason? We're going on the halacha of the Mishnah. We said that when you have a courtyard that's less than Daled Amas, then you have to make the ukkah. It sounds like, but if it is Daled Amas, then it's going to be permitted. What's the reason why if it's larger than Daled Amas, it would be permitted to go ahead and pour out your wastewater? So the Gemara brings two interpretations. Amar Rav says, a person generally uses 2 seah of water every single day. But arba amas adam ritzal zalfin. If a person has a courtyard that's Daled Amas squared, he wants to go ahead and use that wastewater that is pouring out to go ahead and settle the dust of his courtyard, that it shouldn't rise all the dust. Now, as Rashi explains, because the Gemara is going to ultimately explain in the Brisa that we're talking about specifically during the summer months, which is when the dust rises, and he wants to do what's called ziluf to settle the dust, or when the water's coming out, even if it's going to go outside of his courtyard, he doesn't want that to happen. He wants it to stay in the courtyard. So therefore, as the Gemara continues on the base, pachis midalin, when it's less than dalit amas squared, then it's not fit for ziluv. It's not significant enough. Then shayftin. Then it's wastewater, and when it goes out, he wants it to be poured out because it can't function for the ziluv. So therefore that's what Rabbi's coming to explain. That in a large chutzner they sprinkle it lazalfa, they keep the dust down without the water running to the Rosh Hashanah. So therefore, the person wants it to be in the chutzner if it's 4 amas. If it's less than that, then he doesn't want it, and then he wants it to go out. That's the difference between if it's dalat amas or not. But then the Gemara says, and therefore, ida avar uka shari. So if it's less than dalat amas, which we said that you want it to go outside because it's too small to do ziluv. But then that's what the Mishnah was saying. If you made the cesspool, it's going to be permitted. Eloi, but if not us, it's going to be forbidden because the rabbis made a gezerah that maybe going to come to them if we let you go out and pour into your courtyard, which really you want to go out anyway because it's too small to even do a settling, then you might come to actually throw it out directly to Rosh Hashanah. So that's why the Mishnah was saying if it's more than dalat amas, it's going to be permitted because you want it to stay in your courtyard to settle the dust in the summer months. But if it's less than dalat amas, then it's too small, you don't care to do the ziluv, and then you're going to want it to go outside. And then, therefore, we said you're not allowed to do it if you don't have an uka. If it has a uka, it's going to go into the uka, it's going to go into the cesspool. If you don't have the cesspool, then you're going to want to go outside. And if we let you do it that way, you might just come to pour it outside already straight. Why even pour it in my court? You just throw it outside. And therefore, that's the reason of the Mishnah. Now, Reb Zeirama, he says a different interpretation. He says, Dalat Amas tiny. An area of Dalat Amas will absorb 2 sa of water, which is, again, the amount of water a person usually uses during the day. So therefore, even if it goes outside, that wasn't his intention, because dalat amas, usually the water will get absorbed into the ground. But if the area that he has in his court is less than dalat amas, it's less than 50 square feet, so it doesn't usually get absorbed, so then it's going to flow outside, so therefore, since the water is going to run through Rosh Hashanah, therefore that's when it's going to be us. Says my by now, what's the difference between these 2 interpretations of Rabbah and Zera? So Abai, he says, the difference between them is if it's long and narrow. The difference between them is because if you have an 8 amas by 2 amas, which you have the amount of ground of 4 amas squared, then it has the amount of space to get absorbed into some water. But for Rabbah's interpretation of ziluv, it's still not chashuv, it's not significant, it's a very narrow, long thing. So according to Rabbah, that you're not going to have ziluv over here, it's going to be forbidden to go ahead and pour the water if you don't have a cesspool. According to Zera, that the idea is just this amount of ground that will get absorbed, you don't need to have a nuka. Now, according to either one, Rashi says, obviously when the Mishnah says it has to be dalat amas, it means squared in the length and the width. Because if you're not giving a measurement for its width, then there's no explicit measurement, and that would sound like even a very narrow width, and that wouldn't be tenable what that interpretation would be. So everyone agrees when the Mishnah was saying that dalat amas, it meant dalat amas squared. The question is, does it specifically have to be dalat amas squared, or totally read dalat amas squared? According to the one that holds that it's ziluv has to be dalat amas squared to be a chashuv area, and if it's long and narrow, it wouldn't qualify to be able to pour off the water. According to Reb Zera, it would be sufficient because the water would get absorbed. Now the Gemara brings a proof to Reb Zera from our Mishnah. So now we learned in the Mishnah Chatzabach Sadra. It said that a courtyard and that gazebo that's in front of the house, mitzvah from dalat amas, its floor combines with the floor of the courtyard to be the area of dalat amas, which is that if it's dalat amas, like we said, you don't have to go out and make this cesspool. Now the Gemara assumes that this porch, this gazebo, is out of the courtyard, and it's by one of the edges of the courtyard, and still combines to supplement the measurement of the dalat amas by dalat amas. Obviously, the reasoning is that you just have the amount of measurement of ground to absorb the water. Because over here, you don't have dalat amas squared to say that, oh, it's fit for ziluv. It's not. It's just somewhere off to the side, this gazebo. So it says the Gemara, Bishlam, so according to Rabbi makes sense. Now the Rabbi Kashim, according to Rabbi, it's difficult. According to him, it has to be a mokum chash b'dal dal. That says the Gemara, no, Tergum Reb Zera, leave it to Rabbi. Reb Zera, the disputant, he interprets it for Rabbi. He says it's bachsad jamal lechas al panei kol achatzer kula. This gazebo went along the entire length of the courtyard. So, for example, as Rashi explains, the courtyard was actually 4 amas by 2 amas, and the chasad went along the whole entire length, adding on another 2 amas, so made it a total of 4 by 4. So therefore, it was roy lazilu, and it was not difficult on Rabbi. More tries to bring another right, Toshima. Learn the Brisa. Chatzer she'im b'dalat amas al dalat amas. We have a courtyard that's not 4 amas by 4 amas, so as Rashi points out, obviously you see it has to be squared, and it's 4 by 4, then you can't pour water into it on Shabbos, because it has to be at least 4 by 4. So Bishlam according to Rabbi, that makes sense. He's the one who said it has to be a makom chasham of ziluf of 4 by 4. Now the B'zer Kash, according to B'zer, it's difficult. B'zer would tell you, Hamani, who is the Tana of the Mishnah? That is Rabbanani. That's going like Rabbanah. That you're right. They don't permit this. Who's the Tana of this brisa? It's the Rabbanah. This brisa that says has to be 4 amas squared is like the Rabbanan. They don't permit because of just having the amount of space that water could get absorbed. As we learned in the Mishnah, the Chachanim in the Mishnah said that even if you have a gutter that's 100 amas long, you're not pour into the gutter, ready to pour into the roof or into the courtyard. Obviously, the reasoning is because of ziluf, which is like Rabbo. Whereas, therefore, by the gutter, a person is revealing his intention that he wants it to go spilled out. He's not pouring it into the courtyard to settle the dust. So even though it's going to get absorbed, you see, according to Chacham, that's not that we don't care about that. If you're pouring into the gutter, you're not settling it, then they're going to make it usher. So, don't ask me from this brisa. This brisa is going like the Chachamim, as we saw their opinion in Mishnah. But our Mishnah that we're coming to explain over here is I say like Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg. He says the reasoning is because the amount of space that it gets absorbed as the Mishnah taught. Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg said in the Mishnah that you have a gutter that's covered for 4 amas. He says it's going to be effective, and so you're allowed to pour it even into the where it's in Rosh Hashanah. So we had 3 different opinions in the Mishnah. We had the Tanakama, who that's who Rabbi and Zera are coming to explain. We had Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, and we had the Chachamim. Your brisa that you're quoting is the Chachamim. I'm saying that our Mishnah, the Tanakama, is going to Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg. So then the Gemara says, wait a second. My duchkad Reb Zeir. What was forcing Reb Zeir to explain the Mishnah that the reasoning why it has to be daled amas is so that the water could get absorbed, and therefore that's why he permits it even if it's 16 amas in the total area, meaning even if it's just 8 by 2, if it's long and narrow, and then he has to be l'ukmil masnin. He has to explain that the Tana, the Mishnah is Reb Yaakov, like a das yachid, like Reb Yaakov. Why? Why couldn't he explain like Rabbah that no, it has to be 4 amas squared? And it could even be like Rabbanan, and you need it because of Zila, because it's settling the dust. Why do you have to say that's the reason of Tamimaya? So now Rava, he says, because Masnitin Kashise. The wording in the Mishnah he found difficult. Because if it's like Rabbanan, Ma'ir de Tani, why does the Mishnah teach? Chatza shehi pechusa. If you have a courtyard that's less than Dalet Amas, that sounds like that it's missing in the shiur, in the measurement. But if it has at least a shiur of Dalet Amas by Dalet Amas, we don't care if it was squared or was long and narrow, sounds like it would be permitted. Because based on Rabbi's interpretation, Reb Zeir was bothered, listening, it should say, it should say, if a courtyard doesn't have exactly 4 amas by 4 amas squared, which that would sound like, that if it's not made like this square, even if it has the measurement, would be forbidden. No, Rabbi, obviously from the Mishnah, he said, must be Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg. And that's why he says, like Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, that's dependent on the measurement. Which, why would it be dependent on measurement, not on dimension of 4 by 4? Because it's not about ziluf. According to Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, it's about absorption, that it gets absorbed into the ground. But then the Gemara says, wait a second, but the Seva, from the fact that the Seva in the Mishnah, when it talks about, in our Mishnah, pouring into a covered gutter, that halacha was said by Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, and we said his name, so obviously racial love Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, so the Tanakama is obviously not Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, because if it's the same Tana, why is he saying his name? Obviously it's someone else. But the Gemara says, no, Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, it's all Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg. And the word's missing in the Mishnah. This is how you're supposed to read the Mishnah. The Mishnah opened up with these words. If you have a courtyard that's less than Dalet Amas, you now pour water in it on Shabbos. Now, but if it has an area, not even a square, has an area Dalet Amas, you can pour water into it. Why? Because it's not another Tana, it's the same Tana. Which Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg says, if you have a covered gutter, 4 amas, even if it's in Rosh Hashanah, you're allowed to pour water in on Shabbos again. Why? Because the water can be absorbed in that covered area, so it doesn't look like you're throwing it into the street. So therefore, yes, I could say that the time of the Mishnah is Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, and I had to say it because the wording seemed to indicate that it's about the area, not about it being squared, which sounds like Reb Zeir's interpretation that because in Dalet Amas, the society of water the person uses every day gets absorbed. Whereas it doesn't sound like Rabbi's interpretation that's dependent on the area, which is a significant area of saying I want such a nice area to be settled with the dust. Therefore, that's why he said not like Rabbi. Now the Mishnah said, as we just quoted his opinion, he says that bir HaKamer, regarding a covered gutter, he says it's permitted even if it's in Rosh Hashanah as long as it's covered, and because in the area of Dalet Amis, the water is going to get absorbed. The Chum, they said no, even if a gutter is 100 Amis long, I don't care, you don't put water into the gutter, you can pour into the roof, it's spill into the gutter, but you can't pour into the gutter. Says the Gemara, Masnin, our Mishnah, that said that according to the Rabbanan, you could pour onto the roof, and from the roof onto the gutter that's carved out into the roof, is like Chananya. It's not like Chananya, because according to the Chananya, he's actually even more stringent. He says you're allowed to pour water into the courtyard, but on the roof is forbidden. Now, as Rashi explains, in Talmudic times, their roofs were not slanty like our roofs. They were flat, like an upper story. And they would smear it with some type of a tar or cement, and then they would carve out like pipes, like gutters, to have the rain come off, and that would spill out the water. So that's why Chananya holds, you're not allowed to pour it even onto the roof. Why? Because it's kind of like Lina Bryson. Chananya, he says, even if the roof is 100 amas long, you're not allowed to pour water onto the roof. Why? The roof doesn't absorb, only it flows. So if that's the case, because they would make an angle on the flat roof to go off, and it's not getting absorbed. So he's even more stringent. He holds you can't even pour it onto the roof because the roof is not staying over here; it's going into the gutter. So you're essentially going to be pouring it out to the street again, like it was brought up. It's kayach, this and that. But that's the concern that people are going to think that you could go ahead and do that, so they're not even pour it onto the roof. Now, in explanation of the Mishnah, the Gemara concludes with the following brisa. Tanu learned the brisa. But when did we say this halacha of our Mishnah that when the courtyard is less than Dalet Amas squared, you have to have this uka, you have to have this cesspool? As Rashi had mentioned, our Mishnah is only talking about in the summer months. And that's why we had one interpretation regarding settling the dust. That's the halacha, because in the summertime, that's when you get that dust that has to be settled. But in the winter months, you could pour again, and you don't have to stop. You could continue pouring out as much water as you want. Says the Gemara in the explanation of the brisa, my time. What's the reason? So Amar Rava, he says, because in the winter months, a person is okay with the water being absorbed in its place. In other words, he doesn't care for the water to go out of his courtyard, because anyways his courtyard is all filthy and dirty because of the rain. So therefore, in the winter months, it's okay. Now, on that only Abai says to him, but I don't understand. How does this relate to the halacha of the Mishnah? We have the halacha in the Mishnah, according to the Rabbanan, regarding the wastewater. When you're spilling out the wastewater onto a gutter that's even 100 amas long, now Rashi just points out interesting, when we talk about the biv, the gutter, we generally call the water there sheifkin, wastewater, because that's what the gutter is for, it's wastewater to take it out. But when we talk about water regarding the chutz or the courtyard, we call it mayim, because sometimes you actually don't want it as wastewater, you want it to be there to settle the dust. But one thing he's saying, when he's saying the word sheifkin, it means the gutter case, because that's always called wastewater, because it's going out of the gutter. In the halach of the gutter of our Mishnah, the other writes a person wants it to be absorbed, like Rashi says, there's enough, if it's 100 amas long, that gutter, obviously, it's enough. It's not like our gutters, which was non-absorbent. There's enough for it to be absorbed in the gutter itself, and yet we still said Mishnah, not pour it out of the gutter. So how you're telling me that the understanding of the Bryce, which qualifies the halacha of the Mishnah, is that when it's in the winter months, we don't have the problem with the halacha of Mishnah, we don't need the cesspool, we don't care because the guy doesn't care for it to go out. Because what? Because you get absorbed in your courtyard, you don't care that it goes out? What do you mean? The halacha of the Mishnah, when you have a gutter 100 amas long, you get absorbed. Still we said it's forbidden. So Amalei said to him, no. Hassam over there, regarding what I'm telling you in the halacha of the Braisa, regarding the winter months, what should we be concerned for? As he explains. He says, if it's because he prefers that the water should go out, Mishum Kilkal Chatzer, because he doesn't want his courtyard to be ruined. It's all fayaks anyway, because of the rain. It's all ruined anyway, so he doesn't care. Now, and if it's because of a rabbinic concern that maybe people are going to say, look at this guy's gutter, spilling out water into the street. And people say, look what's coming out of his house into the street. And then either people are going to start doing it in the summertime, which is a problem, or people are going to say, you'll have to ride into Rosh Hashanah, because what's the difference if it's through a gutter or if it's into the street itself? That was his intention anyway. So now he's saying no, that there's no concern for that, because mekalchem hein, because the reason why this is not a concern It's because tam tzinoris, generally the pipes in the winter months, they're flowing. And so what does that mean? So Rashi explains, people are going to say it's the rainwater. So they're not going to come to suspect him that he's sponging and pouring out the water into the street. But in contrast, when you have the gutter in the summer months, even though you're right, that the gutter is so long that it has the measurement and the person wants it to be absorbed in its place, you still have to be concerned that maybe people are going to say, oh, what's going on? Well, I see this guy, what's coming out of his house into the street over here? Oh, what? He's pouring water out into the street? So, and that's a concern in the summer months, but in the winter months, people will say it's the rainwater, and therefore that's why it's not difficult on his interpretation of the Brisa, when Allah the Mishnah is only regarding the summer months, not regarding the winter months. But now the Gemara brings another interpretation. Amar Rav Nachman. He says like this: in the winter months, if you have a cesspool that contains 2 sa of water, you're allowed to put in 2 sa of water. Let's say the gutter let's say the cesspool could only contain a capacity of a sa. Then we only give the person permission to utilize and to pour out a sa of water. Rashi says, we said before in the Brisa, when Hazrat Nachman explained in the Brisa, then the Brisa you could do as much as you want to and you don't have to stop in the winter months. So on that, Rashi says, Rav Nachman holds that no, when you have a small cesspool, then the measurement is according to however big the cesspool is. That's what the Tana Brisa is saying, that that's going to be permitted. You can do as much as it contains, but you can't do more than what it contains. But in contrast, the halacha of the Mishnah was said regarding the summer months, which is even more stringent. If it's mafsik sasayim, if it contains 2 sa, then you give 2 sa. So if it contains a sa, then you can't pour out any water at all. Says you might understand. But what do we mean the summer months also? Mafsik sa, if the cesspool contains a sa, at least let him have that capacity of water to spill out of a sa. Says the Gemara, no, if we let you use it when there's a sa, you might come to use it for sasayim, because anyways that's the amount of water a person usually uses. So once we're going to let you, so then you might use the inappropriate amount. So then you should make the same gezerah during the winter months also. Why do we let you use it when it's a sa? For a sa, again, this is all in Rav Nachman's interpretation, you might come to use the sasayim of water that a person usually uses. Says the Gemara, no, same like it said for Rav. What concern do we have to have over there? And that is, even if he's going to come to use sasayim of water, we're not concerned. Because even if he's going to use more than how much the cesspool could contain, it's not going to come out any destructive elements. To say that, oh, he sees a lot of pour out into the cesspool to go outside, we might come to pour it out directly onto the street. It's not true, because it's actually not his intention. He doesn't even want the water to go out anyway, that to think that, oh, now they're going to come to pour it out directly. Because imishum kilkul, if it's because, oh yeah, he wants to pour the water out of into the street because it's ruining his courtyard, it's not true. Anyways, his courtyard is all ruined because it's the winter months. And imishum gizera shem yam, and if you think it's a concern because maybe people who see that they're going to say, oh, it's an urshal ploimik leif, look at his gutter, it's pouring out water, and they're going to think that, oh, he's intending to do that. It's not true. In the winter months, the pipes are always flowing water, it's always raining. So therefore, it's not going to be a problem. But you're right, as Rashi points out, initially, we don't let you do more than the measurement, the contract now. During the winter, if it contains 2 sa, you can do 2 sa. If it contains 1 sa, you can do 1 sa. But in the summer months, we're saying even 1 sa, if that's all it contains, you can't do anything, because we're concerned you might come to do with 2 sa sign. But during the winter, okay, if it's 1 sa, we won't let you 1 sa. But why are we not making the gzeru? Because we're not concerned even if you do 2 sa. What's the big deal? No problem's going to come out of it anyway. And therefore, that's his interpretation of the Brisa. Now, Abaya adds, he says, wait a second, so Hilkach, he says, therefore, since there's no concern during the winter months, so afilakur, then you can even pour out 30 sa of water, afilakurayim, or even 60 sa, the Tana, the Brisa would permit, it sounds like Rava, that would permit one to go ahead and pour out that amount of water, because what are people going to say? Not going to say anything, they're going to think it's just from the rain, and therefore there's no gezer over there in the case of the Moisek Sham. Now, it said in the Mishnah, also, when you have 2 porches, one opposite the other, and they have this narrow courtyard beneath the 2 of them, that you could, and only one of the 2 made a cesspool, only the parties that made the cesspool, they could pour out the water, not the other porch. Now, Amar Rava says, originally Rava thought to say that even if the 2 upper stories made an Eruv, if they made an Eruv, then there's no concern that if you permit for the ones who made the cesspool, then maybe that they might come to carry out their vessel from their house and to bring it into the courtyard and to pour it out directly on the top of the cesspool by walking over there, and then they're carrying it to a courtyard that there was no Eruv. No. Even if they made an Eruv, still Rava says that it's going to be forbidden for the ones who didn't make the Uka to pour into the Uka, into the cistern. Which Amalei Abai said to my time, what's the reason? What's the problem if they made an Eruv together? If you think to say because, what do you mean? There's too much water. There's 4 saw of water because you have 2 houses, each household is using 2 saw, and there's only 1 uka holding 2 saw, so it's going to be too much water. If you think that's the reason why it would be forbidden for the other family, it's not true. But Tanya learned a brisa that says, achasli uka, whether there's a cesspool, achasli gister, or whether there's a shard, it's an earthenware vessel that broke, and they put the 1/2 of it to receive the water, and that's why we're telling you gistra, because it has no other utility. Or brecha, or if, let's say, a very wide pond, which is like made for like fish, or vareva, which is a small boat. Even though this container, whatever this container was, which is used to you pour out the wastewater over there, even if it's already filled up from before Shabbos, that the guy didn't come to fix your cesspool, and it's to the top. Even so, the halacha is shayfun techel mayim b'Shabbos. You could still pour water into that 2 sasayim cesspool, even though the water is going to be flowing out. Because it's just, you have to have the cesspool. We don't care because that's not your intention. As long as you have the cesspool, you're showing that you don't really care. So even though it's going to overflow anyway, it's going to be permitted. So who cares that there's 2 households that have 4 saw of water? We don't care about that anyway. So why if the family didn't make the hookah, why can't they use it? What's the problem? So the Gemara, you're right. Rather, if we're going to say, hachi, but the Gemara concludes that Amar Rabbi says, if you didn't have a Testament, but you're right, not true. We didn't learn Ella Shalai Eruvin. Actually, the problem is only Asr when they don't make an Eruv. But you're right, if they made an Eruv to 2 families, it's actually going to be permitted. We don't care that there's 1 cesspool for the 2 of them because we don't care that it overflows anyway. So wait a second, says the Gemara, then what's the problem? They don't make an Eruv. Why is that a problem? Anyways, no one's going down there to carry. Rav says no, it's a gezerah, it's a decree. That maybe their family that didn't make the cesspool, they might go take their buckets of cess and go down to the uka and pour it down inside of it. Then they're going to be carrying into a chatzor that they didn't join in the air. Now, Trace explains why. Because since the family didn't make the cesspool, it's very far away because they didn't make it. So they don't want the water to spill and ruin the courtyard. So they might come down with their buckets to pour it out into the cesspool. Oh, that's the concern because, yes, then they might come to carry into the cesspool, which there's no Eruv. That's what's been. But if they made an Eruv, then there wouldn't be any problem. Return to the 8th parak in Sechtes, Eruvin, which spoke about primarily the laws of Rub Chatzeres, and then the last Mishnah is regarding that of as applies to water. Something I did discuss in today's Daf Eruvin Daf Peichas was we were qualifying the halacha, the Mishnah, that mechitza tluya, a hanging partition, it permits by this gezustra, the porch, according to Rabbanan, we said is only to draw the water. But to spill out the water is going to be forbidden. Why? Because the water doesn't stop, and it's going straight into the carmelis of the sea, of the water. Whereas by uka, it's permitted because there it's tiny. The water gets absorbed, so it's not going to go out into the street. But then there was another version that says, no, even to spill out is permitted because that's not your intention for it to go out. So even though it goes out, it's still going to be permitted. Then we explained the halacha in the Mishnah when you have these 2 porches. We said you have to make an Eruv. So the Gemara explained for Rav, it's only if they're close by. But if it's far away, then actually the upper one's going to be permitted. Why? Rav goes according to his reasoning, as we mentioned previous Daf, and a person cannot make something forbidden, derech aver, and if it's more than 4 tefachim away, it's only through the ear space that you have utility, you're not going to make forbidden. Then we have this enigmatic statement, which we ultimately explain, that there's a din of Gezel on Shabbos. Not that there is Gezel, there's a din of Hashavas Hagzela of Shabbos. That means to say that even though you usually use this area, but it's not really yours, it's on Shabbos we consider going back to the rightful owner, and therefore that's what the second half of the statement was saying, that the churva is mafzil l'bayim, it goes back to the owner, and that you don't have rights and that you can't use it. Our Mishnah that said when you have 2 porches, the low one is making forbidden on the El Yaina. What do you mean? It's not his. Why is it making forbidden? Oh, because they made a mechitza b'shutras. That actual partition by the upper story was actually in a partnership. And when they make a separate mechitza tluy for the low one, why is he going to be permitted for the upper one? He still has a partnership with the upper one. Oh, because he's Megal Das. He doesn't touch it. He says, I have my own, so he's not part of that, and therefore, even though they didn't make an Eruv, he's not going to make it forbidden. We had to look at the next mission. We said when you have a quarter that's less than Daled Amos, and the shiur of Daled Amos that will not require uka. The Gemara said that the chatzar and the chsadra they could combine for the Daled Amos. But if it's less than Daled Amos, you now pour water in that on Shabbos. Unless you make an uka, you make a pit that contains sasayim. And if it's on the outside, then at least you got to cover that pit. According to Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, if you have a gutter that's covered Daled Amos in Rosh Hashanah, then you can pour the water into that gutter. According to Chacham, no. Even if the roof is 100 amos long, you're not allowed to pour into the biv, unless you pour it onto the roof. On the roof, then you could. Now, we said that if there's two porches, one opposite the other, the one that made the uka is going to be permitted to go ahead and pour the water into the uka. Now, the Gemara explained what's the reason why you're allowed to pour without an uka if it's Daled Amos. So Rabbah says because sasayim is the amount of water a person usually uses. And if you have an area of Daled Amos, then it's a chashav area, you want to settle the dust. So therefore you don't want it to go out. Reb Zera said that no, a different reason. He says if the area is Daled Amos, the water is going to get absorbed, so it's not going out. So therefore it's permitted. But less than that, it's going to go out. Therefore you need to have a uka, you need to have a assessment. What's the difference between their interpretations? If it's what's called arch v'kat, if it's long and narrow, where it has an area of that, but it's not squared. That's not royal aziliv, but it's going to be absorbed. And then the Gemara had a discussion, a Masa Matan, how to explain the halacha of the Mishnah based on these two different interpretations of the Isser, who is the Tanna of our Mishnah, is the Tanna of our Mishnah like the Chacham, is like Eliezer ben Yaakov, and that was related all to how they interpreted it. It was regarding time and Maya, regarding the Bryce that was asked on Reb Zera, which sounded like Rabbah, but then he says that it was like the Chacham, our Mishnah is not like Eliezer ben Yaakov, where therefore that's regarding the absorption, not regarding that of settling the dust. Then we said the Chachamim that are stringent in our Mishnah, that they say that you can't pour into the gutter, but at least they're more lenient than Chananya. Because Chananya says you can't even pour on the roof because the roof doesn't absorb and therefore it's going to go and flow out. He doesn't like even going from the roof to the gutter to outside. But the courtyard you could. Then we said the Bryce that qualified the Mishnah said that the whole Mishnah is only in the summer months. But in the winter months, Sheifet B'Sheinim, and then you can pour out as much as you want, you're not bothered. Now there's two interpretations in that Bryce. The first interpretation says that because a person he's okay with it getting absorbed in its place because what's the problem? Now in contrast, by Sheifchen, of the wastewater, we are concerned because that's in the summer months and you do want it to go out and pour out. Even though the gutter is 100 amos long, you still want it to go out. But here, by the winter months, what's the concern? Where the court is already ruined, and no people are going to say that, oh, this guy's gutter is pouring out, because gutters are always pouring out during the winter months. And they're going to say it's from the rainwater. And the Rabbi said that actually, yeah, therefore it should even be permitted for a core of Krem, he could spill out as much water as he wants. Rav Nachman gave a different interpretation. He said that in the winter months, you could put as much water as the cesspool contains. You could go maximum capacity. But in the summer months, that was the difference that the Rais was saying. If it contains only a saw, you can't do anything. Why can't you do anything? Because if you let you use a saw, you might come to use as the normal usage, which is society. But in the winter months, what should we be concerned for? Like we said before in Rabbah, that people don't care anyway, no one's going to say anything anyway. And that was the two interpretations in the Brisa, that it's only our Mishnah is in the Meisachama, but Meisach Shamim, there's two different interpretations that we are more lenient. Then we explained the halach of the Mishnah. The final halach of the Gemara was when you have these two porches, one opposite the other, the Gemara's conclusion was that Rabbah said that if they made an Erev, actually it's going to be permitted, because what's the problem? We don't care that the water is going to overflow, because we saw in the Brisa that the water could overflow as much as it wants, so as long as you have a cesspool over there. The problem was specifically if they did not make an Erev, then it's going to be forbidden to the one who didn't make the Uka because of Gzeira that you might come to carry out the vessels from the house to over there, because as Taisa explained, since a little bit further from you, because you didn't make the zespel, you might come to carry down your bucket of waste and pour it over there, and then you're going to be carrying an area that is in Morelis. Hanu Lach Parashmini, which will return to the 8th parak, Mishtatfen. Wow, keep on learning. That's supposed to be a thumbs up, but it was not exactly. But anyway, thank you to Enten for hosting us.